Have you ever wondered why some people seem to attract success, opportunities, and prosperity as if the universe were conspiring in their favor, while others, despite working hard, barely manage to get ahead? It seems unfair, doesn't it? But what if I told you that the difference isn't in luck, talent, or inheritance, but in something invisible, silent, yet incredibly powerful? And what if I told you there's a real, proven formula to turn any dream into reality, regardless of where you are right now? Sounds absurd. That's exactly what I thought when I heard it for the first time, until the day I proved it to be true with my own life. For a long time, I believed life was just a sequence of random events, a directionless race where some were born lucky and others simply had to settle for survival. I'd see people prospering and ask myself, what do they have that I don't? I worked hard, did everything I was told was right, but it seemed success was always reserved for others. It was then that I realized the turning point wasn't in something I did, but rather in something I thought. It wasn't a sudden moment of enlightenment, but the result of a deep discomfort, an unbearable feeling of living beneath what I knew deep down I was capable of being. And perhaps you felt that too. That quiet voice whispering that there's more to life than just paying bills and waiting for the weekend. I perfectly remember the first time I read the words, "Think and grow rich." They sounded almost naive. I was exhausted, in debt, without direction, and someone was telling me all I needed to do was change the way I thought. It seemed absurd, but something in me decided to listen. I started to study, to observe successful people, and I noticed a pattern. Not one of them spoke of luck or circumstances. They all spoke of decision. They had decided at some point that they would be successful, even before they had any proof of it. And that's when I understood what was missing in me. I had never truly decided. I merely wished. I said I wanted a better life, but deep down, I kept accepting the same limitations, the same fears, the same excuses. I lived in survival mode, reacting to problems instead of creating solutions. That was the turning point. When I realized that what separates a dream from reality is a clear decision, everything began to change. But don't think this change was magical or immediate. It started within me, with small daily gestures, with the conscious choice not to be swayed by the old beliefs that kept me trapped. I started questioning what I accepted as truth. Why did I believe I needed to suffer to achieve success? Why did I think money was for others and not for me? These questions deconstructed me, and at the same time they set me free. Have you ever felt this way, as if you're stuck in a routine that doesn't represent who you truly are? Perhaps you wake up every day with the feeling that you're just surviving, trying not to sink. But what if I told you that precisely at this point, when everything seems the same, lies the opportunity to change everything? That's how it was for me. I was at rock bottom, without prospects, and yet there, within me, was a spark that said, "You can do more." I didn't know how, but I decided I would find out. That decision, however small it seemed at the time, was the beginning of everything. And that's what many people don't understand. True transformation doesn't begin when you have money, time, or opportunities. It begins when you decide you will no longer accept a limited life. When that decision is born within you, something changes in your vibration, your demeanor, your actions. People notice, opportunities start to appear, ideas begin to emerge, and you start to attract exactly what once seemed distant. Not because the world changes, but because you change the way you relate to it. I realized that the universe doesn't respond to those who complain, nor to those who wait. It responds to those who decide, and deciding is different from desiring. To desire is to want something and at the same time doubt it. To decide is to eliminate plan B, to act as if it were already inevitable. When I decided, I stopped thinking about failure. I stopped worrying about what if it doesn't work out, because that kind of thinking is what keeps you stuck at the starting line. I started visualizing the life I wanted with almost palpable clarity. Every day I read aloud the income I wanted to earn, as if it were a fact, not a dream. And that started to change everything around me. People looked at me as if I had gone mad. And in a way I had gone mad, but it was a good kind of madness, the kind of someone who decides to live the impossible. Because when you truly believe you are capable, the impossible begins to unravel before your eyes. I stopped waiting for the right moment and started creating the moment. And that is what separates those who turn dreams into reality from those who spend their lives merely dreaming. The truth is, all of us reach a breaking point. A moment when we realize that continuing the same way hurts more than changing. And that's what happened to me. The turning point wasn't the book I read, nor the mentor I found, but the decision to never again accept less than I knew I deserved. From then on, every step, every failure, every small victory, everything was part of a journey I myself had chosen. And perhaps this is your moment now. Perhaps you're hearing this and feel something stirring within you, a mix of fear and hope. Don't ignore that feeling. That's how change begins, silent, uncomfortable, but undeniable. The turning point isn't an external event, it's an internal choice, a decision that changes the course of everything. I made mine, and from that day forward I was never the same again. For years I was an expert at postponing decisions. There was always one reason to wait a little longer, waiting for the right moment, waiting to have more money, waiting for life to get organized. I told myself I was being prudent, but in truth I was a hostage to fear. I believed that to start something big, I first needed to understand how everything would unfold, every detail, every step. And that's exactly what kept me stagnant. Because the truth is simple. Those who wait to feel ready never start. The universe doesn't reward those who hesitate. It rewards those who decide. I remember one conversation I had with a friend back then. He asked me, "Bob, how can you be so sure you'll succeed?" And I replied without hesitation, "Because I've already decided." He laughed, thinking it was arrogance. But what he didn't understand is that true decision isn't arrogance, it's faith. Faith not in something external, but in yourself. When you truly decide, there's no more room for doubt. You don't wait for the signs, you become the sign. And this is one of the most powerful laws of the universe. Everything that is firm in the mind tends to materialize in reality. People constantly ask me, "But what if I decide and fail?" And I ask back, "And what if you never decide and spend your entire life wondering what would have happened if you had tried?" Indecision is one of the biggest causes of human unhappiness. It keeps people in a state of paralysis, trapped between what they are and what they could be. The fear of failure is what prevents most from making real decisions. Failure, in truth, is merely a temporary setback, a sign you are exploring different paths. Indecision, however, that is a permanent state of failure. Life does not wait for you to understand every single step. It responds when you take the first one. I have never met a successful person who had all the answers from the start. Not one. They began with doubts, with fear, with insecurity, but they began. The secret is simple. Action brings clarity. With each step, the path reveals itself a little more. Do you want to change jobs, start a business, transform your financial life? Decide now. Because what you do not decide, the world decides for you. And when the world makes the choice, it is almost always in favor of your comfort zone, not your potential. A decision is a turning point. It separates the old from the new, the possible from the impossible, who you were from who you can become. I have seen people completely transform their lives simply because they decided to change. And I have seen others spend their entire lives preparing for a day that never arrives, because the right day does not exist. The only moment that exists is now. To decide is to declare to the universe, "I am ready," even without knowing how. And the how appears. It always appears. It was like that for me. When I left the fire department, I did not know what would come next. But I knew that if I stayed, I would be denying the calling that came from within. The decision was terrifying but also liberating. It was the first act of faith that truly transformed my reality. And that is the point. You do not need to see the entire staircase to take the first step. You just need to decide you're going to climb. The difference between those who live dreaming and those who live achieving lies in a single moment, the moment of decision. When you finally say enough, when you understand you can no longer live torn between wanting and fearing, that is when the universe begins to move in your favor. And believe me, it moves. Because decision is the most powerful command you can issue. It is the point where mind, body, and spirit align in a single direction. And when that happens, there is no force in the world capable of stopping the inevitable. When I finally understood that what truly prevented me from prospering was not a lack of effort, nor a lack of opportunities, but the mental programming that kept me stuck, something within me awakened. I lived a good part of my life believing I needed to work harder and harder, strive more and more, but the results never changed. It was like rowing against the tide, expending energy but going nowhere. It was then that I realized my subconscious mind, that vast invisible territory governing almost all our decisions, was operating against me, repeating patterns I did not even know existed. You need to understand that the subconscious mind is like fertile soil where all seeds, good or bad, grow. It does not distinguish between what is real and what is imagined, what is right and what is wrong. It simply accepts what is repeated with emotion and conviction. And that is exactly what kept me trapped in poverty for so long. I grew up hearing that money was scarce, that you had to sweat to survive, that only the lucky ones got rich. These words, repeated over the years, became invisible commands that my mind followed without question. When I understood this, I realized I needed to do a thorough overhaul. Imagine living for decades with programming that tells you, you cannot, you do not deserve it, this is not for you. These phrases transform into behaviors. They shape your actions, your choices, and even the kind of people you attract. That is why it is not enough to say you want to change your life. You need to rewrite the code running in the background. That is exactly what I did. I started observing my thoughts, like a scientist observing an experiment. I realized that every time I said, I cannot afford that, or that is too expensive, I was reinforcing the same scarcity program. And the universe, obediently, returned exactly what I affirmed: more lack. The first step to reprogramming the mind is awareness. You cannot change what you do not acknowledge. So I started writing down everything I told myself about money, success, and happiness. It was painful to realize how much I sabotaged myself with automatic words, but it was liberating. The second step was to replace each limiting thought with a new affirmation, something that reflected what I truly wanted to believe. At first, it felt false. I felt strange saying, I am prosperous, while my bank account showed the opposite. But the more I repeated it, the more natural it became. And here is the key. Repetition is the tool that embeds the new pattern. Just as a trail forms on the ground when someone repeatedly walks the same path, the mind creates new neural connections with each emotional repetition. And when emotion enters the scene, learning accelerates. That is why I did not just repeat my new beliefs. I felt them. I closed my eyes and saw myself living that reality. I felt the weight of dollar bills in my hands, heard the sound of my new office doors opening, saw people calling me by name and thanking me for my work. Everything was vivid, real. The subconscious mind does not understand one day or maybe. It only understands now. That is why every time you say, I will be rich, it interprets it as something distant, unattainable. But when you say, I am rich, I am healthy, I am successful, you are planting the seed in the present tense, and it is in the present that creation begins. In the beginning, my mind resisted. The old programming tried to pull me back. I heard that inner voice saying, Bob, you are fooling yourself, that is not true. But I learned to silence that voice and replace it with another, stronger one. The reprogramming process requires consistency. It is not enough to do it just once a week, or only when you feel inspired. The mind changes through constant repetition until the new thought becomes automatic. And when that happens, you no longer have to struggle to believe. You simply believe. I started noticing small changes. People offering me help, opportunities appearing out of nowhere, ideas that once seemed unattainable starting to become possible. It was not coincidence. It was the reflection of my new mental frequency. There is a concept I like to call internal evidence. It is the moment when something inside you shifts before the external world does. You start to feel different, behave differently, and the universe responds. It is like tuning a radio station. If you want to listen to classical music, there is no point staying on a rock station's frequency. The same thing happens with the mind. You need to adjust your internal frequency to the kind of life you want to live. I did this through a simple daily ritual. Every morning before starting the day, I would read my goals aloud and imagine myself having already achieved all of them. And before going to sleep, I repeated the process. I knew that the state between waking and sleep is when the subconscious is most receptive. In just a few weeks, I started noticing subtle changes, a sense of lightness, more confidence, less fear. This was proof that the subconscious was being reprogrammed. Perhaps you will not notice it at first, but every new thought is like a seed. If you water it consistently, it will sprout. I did not know how or when, but I knew something was happening, and it did. What once seemed unattainable began to materialize. Clients appeared, money started flowing, and my life took such a massive turn that it still moves me to remember it today. Reprogramming the mind is, above all, an act of courage, because it means abandoning old truths, letting go of the identity that kept you safe, even if unhappy. It is accepting that you are not what others said you were. It is allowing yourself to be the most prosperous, creative, and confident version of yourself. Change begins in the invisible, but soon the visible adjusts. And when that happens, you understand what I understood. It is not the world that changes. It is you who changes within, and the world merely reflects that new vibration. Emotions are the true engine behind all creation. It took me a long time to grasp this. For a long time, I thought it was enough to repeat positive phrases or make well-structured plans to change my life. But even with all the discipline and knowledge I acquired, things seemed to stay put. It was then that I realized the problem was not in what I said, but rather in what I felt. Emotion is the language the subconscious understands. And while the rational mind speaks in words, the subconscious responds to the vibration of what you feel. Imagine this. You can affirm 1,000 times that you are successful, but if deep down you feel fear, doubt, or scarcity, the message you are truly sending is the opposite. The universe does not respond to what you say you want. It responds to what you feel you are. And this is where most people fail. They try to change their minds, but they remain trapped in the same emotion. They want wealth, but they live feeling guilty when thinking about money. They want love, but they feel afraid of being rejected. They want freedom, but they carry within them the weight of insecurity. And the energy you carry is what shapes the reality around you. I realized this in a painful way, during a time when it seemed everything was falling apart. I worked hard, read about personal development, made affirmations, but the results were slow. So until one day, completely exhausted, I sat in silence and asked myself, what do I truly feel about myself? The answer was immediate. Shame. Shame for having failed. Shame for not being the man I believed I could be. It was then that I understood why nothing was working. I was trying to build prosperity on a foundation of shame, and that's impossible. Emotion is the bridge between the invisible world and the physical world. If you want to change what you see, you need to change what you feel. I began to observe my emotions carefully. Each time a thought of fear arose, I didn't try to push it away. I took a deep breath, acknowledged it, and replaced it with a feeling of gratitude. Gratitude is one of the most powerful frequencies that exist because it transforms any situation the exact moment it is felt. You cannot be grateful and at the same time feel scarcity. The mind cannot sustain two opposing vibrations simultaneously. Every day I performed a simple yet transformative exercise. Before getting out of bed, I closed my eyes and felt gratitude. I didn't think of anything specific, I just felt it. It was as if I was telling the universe, I trust you. And the interesting thing is, the more I connected to that emotion, the more situations arose to justify that feeling. It was as if life was telling me, keep feeling this way and I will continue to show you more reasons to be thankful. This is what I call the emotional cycle of abundance. You start by feeling, and the universe starts responding. It's no coincidence that the most successful people talk about loving what they do. Emotion creates a vibrational field that attracts matching circumstances. I began to use this energy consciously. When I read my goals, I didn't just repeat them mechanically. I closed my eyes and imagined that all of it had already happened. I felt the relief of having my bills paid, the pride of being able to help other people, the joy of living a full life. And for a few minutes, that feeling was real. I cried sometimes, laughed other times, but I always felt it. And that's how I learned the language of the universe. Emotion is vibration, and vibration is creation. There's something fascinating in the scientific studies about this. Recent research shows that the human heart emits an electromagnetic field up to 60 times more powerful than that of the brain. This means your emotions literally influence the space around you. When you feel fear, the field contracts. When you feel love, it expands. And this expansion is what connects you to opportunities, to ideas, to the right people. This is how, even in times of scarcity, I began to attract situations that seemed improbable. Invitations, partnerships, opportunities that seemed to come out of nowhere. But nothing came from nowhere. It came from the energy I was emitting. Emotion also defines how you react to challenges. When something goes wrong, you have two choices: vibrate in fear or vibrate in faith. I learned that faith is not the absence of fear, but the decision to feel confident despite it. When things seemed to get out of control, I repeated to myself, everything is happening in my favor, even if I don't understand how yet. This simple phrase completely shifted my energy. What once paralyzed me now propelled me forward. Because I stopped being a victim of circumstances and became their conscious creator. Over time, I realized that emotion isn't something you have, it's something you generate, and it can be cultivated like a muscle. When I started training my mind to feel gratitude, love, and enthusiasm every day, my body started to respond. My posture changed, my tone of voice changed, my expression changed, and the world, like a mirror, began to reflect this new image. People started treating me differently, new doors opened, and I realized that everything I was seeking outside myself had always been within. It's impossible to create prosperity while feeling scarcity. It's impossible to attract love while feeling rejection. And it's impossible to live in peace while vibrating in guilt. Your emotions are the most powerful magnet there is. And when you decide to adjust your emotional field, the universe adjusts with you. I learned that the secret is not to fight against what you feel, but to transform the feeling. If there is fear, transform it into courage. If there is doubt, transform it into faith. If there is resentment, transform it into gratitude. This emotional alchemy is what changes the course of life. I remember a night when everything seemed lost. I had no money to pay the bills. I didn't know what to do. I sat on the floor of my small apartment, closed my eyes, and began to give thanks for everything I still had, for being alive, for being able to breathe, for having hope. It was one of the most sincere moments of my life. And that same week, an unexpected opportunity appeared, and everything started to move. Not because something magical happened, but because the energy shifted. And it's always like that. Emotion is the switch of reality. When you learn to use it, the impossible ceases to exist. I used to believe that time was my enemy. I woke up in a rush, ate lunch in a rush, went to sleep feeling like the day had slipped through my fingers. And yet, it seemed I never made progress. Time passed, but my life didn't change. Until the day I realized that the problem wasn't time, it was how I related to it. I was taught to think that the busier I was, the more productive I would be. That being exhausted was a sign of merit. But this is one of the greatest traps of the modern mind. Being busy doesn't mean you're progressing. How many people do you know who live rushing around but remain stuck in the same place? I was one of them. The revelation happened during a lunch with my mentor, Earl Nightingale. Frustrated, I asked, "Earl, how do you manage to do so much with the same amount of time we all have? What's your secret for managing time?" He looked at me calmly and replied, "Bob, you don't manage time, you manage activities." That hit me like a lightning bolt. Time is neutral. It passes the same way for everyone, rich or poor, successful or lost. What changes is what you do within it. Time doesn't bend, stretch, or multiply, but your decisions do. I realized I was living reactively, like a firefighter putting out fires, always busy but rarely efficient. I answered emails, solved small problems, and let myself be distracted by urgencies that in truth didn't matter. It was a constant rush that made me feel useful, but got me nowhere. That's when I decided to turn the tables. Instead of starting the day trying to deal with whatever the world threw at me, I started the day by deciding what was important to me. And the difference was profound. I stopped chasing time and started directing my energy. Each decision is like a seed you plant in the field of time. If you plant distraction, you reap regret. If you plant purpose, you reap progress. And the curious thing is that the more intentional I became, the more time seemed to expand. I had the sensation that the days were longer, when in reality, I simply stopped wasting them. Most people don't have a time shortage problem. They have a focus problem. They spend the hours of the day on what's urgent, not what's important. They answer messages, open notifications, and drown themselves in tasks that seem necessary, but build nothing. Research from the University of California shows that, after an interruption, a person takes on average 23 minutes to regain the same level of concentration. Now imagine how many times you are interrupted throughout the day. Messages, social media, noises, small distractions. Each one of them steals a piece of your vital energy. That's why so many people feel tired, even without having done anything truly productive. They are constantly fragmented, with their mind divided between the past, the future, and their phone screen. I lived like this for years until I realized that productivity has nothing to do with quantity and everything to do with quality. I started practicing something I called daily intention. Every morning I wrote down the 3 things that would truly make a difference that day. Not 10, not 20, just 3. And I committed to doing those 3 before anything else. It was impressive how this transformed the outcome. Time didn't change, but the direction of my attention did. And where attention goes, energy flows. I started to see real progress because I finally stopped confusing movement with advancement. It's easy to be busy. It's difficult to be focused. Another essential change was understanding that saying no is a form of self-love. For a long time I said yes to everything, to requests, commitments, favors, even when I knew it pulled me away from what was important. The fear of disappointing others made me betray myself. But every time you say yes to what doesn't matter, you are saying no to what truly matters. It was when I started practicing the power of no that time started to work in my favor. I learned to protect my attention like one protects a treasure, because it is in fact the most valuable asset you possess. I remember a period when I worked 3 different jobs. I slept little, ate poorly, and believed that was the price of success. But all I was buying with that effort was exhaustion. It was only when I started dedicating 15 minutes a day exclusively to planning my future that everything began to change. 15 minutes that I called sacred minutes. No matter the tiredness, no matter the obligations, those 15 minutes were inviolable. I used them to review goals, write down ideas, and visualize the future in detail. At first, it seemed like little, but within months, those minutes transformed into real results. Time is an invisible currency, and what you do with it shows how much you value yourself. When you spend hours on activities that don't bring you closer to your purpose, you're telling the universe, "My life isn't a priority," and the universe responds accordingly. It was when I started treating my time with respect that life began to reciprocate. I stopped wasting my hours on empty conversations, useless distractions, and worries that led nowhere. Instead, I used my time to learn, grow, and act with purpose. And here's a truth few understand. You'll never find time for important things. You have to create it. Time doesn't simply open up. You're the one who carves it out. With every no you say to what's irrelevant, you're making space for what truly builds. I learned to value the quiet intervals, the moments of pause, because it's in them that world-changing ideas emerge. While the world rushes on, those who choose to stop and think create. Today I look back and realize I never lacked time. I lacked direction. I lacked decision. When you understand this, you stop blaming the clock and start taking command. Time is the same for everyone. What changes is what you do with it. And when you decide that every minute will be a seed for something grand, time stops being an enemy and becomes your most loyal ally. There comes a moment when you need to look at yourself and ask, Am I just absorbing inspiration, or am I truly aligning with this new self? Because desiring change is beautiful, but publicly committing to change, that moves internal mountains. That's why, if you're feeling this energy growing within you, take advantage now and subscribe and hit the like button. It's not an empty gesture, it's a psychological symbol. It's you saying, I'm in. Every physical decision that reinforces your intention, however small it may seem, strengthens a new identity. And don't underestimate that, because the mind works through associations. When you take a stand, even with a simple click, you're training your mind to say yes to your future. But let's go deeper. How many times have you said you would change, and then reverted to the old pattern? Woke up motivated on a Monday, and by Tuesday you were already paralyzed by fear, doubt, or that almost imperceptible whisper of the old self saying, later. How many times have you started a project with enthusiasm and then felt your energy drain away? This is precisely how the mind operates when it doesn't find external commitment. The mind seeks the familiar zone. It prefers the security of stagnation to the discomfort of growth. People don't fail for lack of dreams. They fail because they try to change in silence, protected, hidden, without creating the emotional responsibility to sustain the process. I remember one time, early in my journey, when I was teaching these principles, even before I felt ready in a material sense. Some looked on and thought, who is he to talk about success? And I understand, but I knew that if I waited to be perfect to teach, I would never start. It was a public commitment, a simple action that put me in the game. I was declaring to myself and to the universe, I am following this path, with trembling hands if necessary, but I am following. And every time I spoke to someone about goals, I reinforced my own. Every time I guided someone to act, I obliged myself to act once more. That commitment built me step by step, until the world began to see what I already saw. And this is where many people get stuck. Perhaps you recognize yourself. Fear of judgment, fear of failing in front of others. How many opportunities have slipped away because you thought, what if I fail? How many times have you sabotaged yourself trying to appear prudent when in reality you were afraid of exposing yourself? Science calls this mental self-preservation bias. The brain avoids situations with emotional risk, even if it costs you your future. Most people prefer to fail in secret than grow under the scrutiny of others. But the price of that is living trapped in the expectation of a perfect moment that never arrives. Public commitment isn't about proving yourself to others. It's about proving to yourself that you're taking your life seriously. When you declare an intention to the world, you create emotional energy. You create momentum, and momentum attracts circumstances. Have you ever noticed that when you truly decide to start something and talk about it, opportunities begin to appear? People emerge, ideas surface, resources arise. It's not a coincidence, it's vibrational and psychological alignment. The universe responds to clarity and courage, never to hesitation. So here's something powerful I want you to do in the coming days as a personal challenge. Choose one goal, just one, and declare it to someone you trust. And don't declare it with doubt. Declare it with conviction. Say what you're going to do and within what time frame. It can be simple. Read daily for 10 minutes. Save a certain amount each week. Study a skill. Train every day. What matters isn't the size, it's the commitment. You'll notice that from the moment you speak, something inside you reorganizes itself. The energy shifts. You don't want to fail yourself, and that strengthens your discipline. And remember, your clicking, subscribe, and like here isn't for me, it's for you. It's you sending a silent message to your subconscious. I make decisions aligned with my growth. You're not just watching a video, you're taking control of what's being built within you. And every time you act toward the future you desire, even in small gestures, the old version loses power, and the new one comes to life. Because in the end, success doesn't begin with the result. It begins with the gesture, with the symbolic act, with the I decide now. And when you decide like that, with intention and action combined, reality has no choice. It responds, always. When you see someone achieve extraordinary levels of success, many people rush to look for external explanations. She got lucky. She knew the right people. She had opportunities I didn't. It's curious, because that narrative serves more to comfort the mind than to explain reality. The truth is, the world has never been gentle with those who dream big, and those who truly win first win internally. When I mention someone like Oprah, I'm not talking about fame. I'm talking about what happens when someone decides to be the cause, not the effect, of their own life. She came from a background where, statistically, the world expected her to fail. And yet, inside her was a silent conviction. I didn't come here to live a limited life. There was no security, no guarantees, no paved road. There was a decision. And that decision, day after day, gained strength until it became impossible to ignore. What people don't realize is that what creates transformation isn't the goal itself, but the internal alignment with it. Oprah didn't wait to have everything to start. She didn't wait for validation. She built a mental and emotional pattern before the physical structure. It's the same process I experienced when I started teaching principles that were transforming my own life, when it was still far from what it would become. Because when you speak the truth of your soul, even if the world can't yet see what you see, reality begins to bend. And here's something that might deeply touch you. While most seek external references, true creators look within. How many times have you said to yourself, "When my situation improves, then yes." When you have more time, more money, more recognition, more support. But what if all of that only appears later, never before? How many people do you know who died waiting for permission to act? How many dreams were buried because someone believed they first needed to deserve it before starting? Life doesn't hand you a ready-made plan. It responds to your positioning. I remember perfectly the first time I spoke with conviction about prosperity and universal laws before a group. My financial reality didn't yet reflect the magnitude of the vision I carried, and I felt that discomfort, that voice saying, "Who are you to talk about this?" But at the same time, another, deeper voice said, "Keep going, because you're not describing who you are. You're describing who you've decided to be." And every person who applied it and came back saying their life was changing confirmed that within me. It was living proof that when you align internally, the external follows. That's why it's so powerful to observe examples of people who broke patterns, not to idolize them, but to remind you of the same spark you carry. I ask, have you truly allowed yourself to believe that you can be an exception to the statistics? That your past doesn't dictate your future? Or are you still trapped in the logic of survival, waiting for tangible reasons to believe in something born in the invisible? Science already proves that our perception shapes our behavior, our emotions shape our choices, and our choices shape our reality. You can't feel scarcity and attract abundance. You can't see yourself as small and receive great things. And when someone like Oprah, or anyone who started with nothing and built an internal and external empire, transforms, they prove that the law works. They proved that it wasn't about luck, but about vibration, emotional discipline, and clarity. Now think about what you have ignored within yourself. What talent, what desire, what idea have you shrunk away from because you don't want to seem presumptuous, because you fear being judged, because you think it's not the right time yet? How many times have you censored yourself before even starting? The world doesn't need more people waiting to feel ready. He needs people willing to rise before the structure is ready, just like the greats did. The real question isn't whether you want to achieve something extraordinary. The question is, are you willing to become the person who attracts the extraordinary? It all starts there, and when you do that, something magical happens. The world begins to see what you first saw in yourself. And that's how dreams cease to be mere images in the mind and become facts in life. There are stories that shine brightly and then fade away with the same intensity that captivated the world, serving as a reminder that success without internal structure is like building a castle on quicksand. Consider the case of MC Hammer. At his peak, he accumulated more than $30 million. An enormous mansion, a colossal team, extravagant spending. But here's the detail many overlook. He built wealth before he built identity, discipline, and proportional awareness. And when money arrived faster than internal transformation, The outcome was inevitable. In 1996, he declared bankruptcy, not because he lacked talent, but because he lacked the mental alignment to sustain what he had achieved. Is it tough? Yes, but it's real. And I'm not telling you this to judge, but to awaken. Because perhaps you think, if I earned more, my life would change. How many times has that thought crossed your mind? However, studies show that 70% of people who suddenly gain large sums of money, like winning the lottery, lose everything within a few years. It's not about money, it's about identity, habits, self-concept. The mind always pulls you back to the zone it recognizes as normal. If you don't elevate yourself internally, the external falls apart. It's a principle founded not only on what I teach, but on human behavior, psychology, and neuroscience. Have you ever noticed that sometimes life gives you small victories and then seems to take everything away? Some say it's bad luck. I say it's a test. Life asks you, are you ready to sustain this? Has your internal world changed, or just your enthusiasm? How many times have you started a project, a diet, a new habit and then returned to where you were? It's not weakness, it's a mental program preserving the old self. And there's no greater wealth than recognizing this cycle, because then you can finally break it. I went through something similar on a different scale. When I started earning money with my cleaning company, everything was new. I had never seen sums of that size. And do you know what happened? At first, I sabotaged myself a few times. I spent without planning. I allowed myself to be influenced by impulsive emotions. I watched the money grow and felt a mixture of joy and fear. Fear of losing. Fear of not being able to keep it. Until one day I sat down alone and wrote, "If I don't change who I am, I will lose what I've gained." That moment shook me. It was a silent plea to take control of my mind before the external world taught me that lesson in a more painful way. It's not hard to accumulate money. What's hard is sustaining the mindset to multiply and protect it. True bankruptcy never starts in the bank account, it starts in thought. And true wealth does too. That's why you need to observe yourself with humility and courage. Today, perhaps your challenges are paying bills, controlling impulses, maintaining focus. For others, it might be dealing with expansion, with rapid growth. In all cases, the rule is the same. Without internal change, any external victory is temporary. I want you to do a simple but profound exercise in the coming days. Every time you receive money, little or a lot, ask yourself 3 questions. Do I know exactly where it's going? Am I handling it responsibly, or am I trying to compensate for an emotional void with consumption? Would the person I want to become use this money in the same way? You'll be surprised by what you discover. This exercise isn't about financial control, it's about emotional control. Lasting wealth is a product of consistent decisions, not momentary peaks. MC. Hammer's story isn't a critique, it's a mirror. Talent without awareness turns into financial tragedy. A dream without discipline turns into regret. Money without the right mindset turns into a burden. Don't just wish to climb, wish to become someone capable of remaining at the top. Because growing too quickly without a foundation can be more painful than never growing at all. And you're not here to explode and vanish. You're here to build, consolidate, and multiply. And it all begins within, always within. Fear, doubt, insecurity. These forces don't disappear when you decide to grow. On the contrary, they intensify. They whisper, what if you fail? What if they laugh at you? What if you lose everything? Most people only take a step when they feel confident, when the scenario seems safe, when their heart is calm. But confidence doesn't come before action. It comes after. The act of moving forward is what creates courage. Have you ever noticed that? That day you were terrified, but you went anyway. And at the end you thought, if I had known it would be like this, I would have done it sooner. Exactly. Fear tricked you, and it keeps doing that until you stop obeying it. I experienced this so many times I lost count. When I left the Navy, many people thought I was crazy. When I abandoned the security of a traditional career to study mind, prosperity, and purpose, no one applauded me. There was no red carpet to greet me, and there was silence, doubt, judgment, and inside me there was a whirlwind. But there was something greater. The awareness that if I waited to feel ready, my entire life would pass and I would never get anywhere. Have you ever felt that? That feeling that something greater is calling you, but fear tries to keep you where you are? There's a moment in life when you need to choose. Continue obeying the voice that protects you, or listen to the voice that expands you. Fear isn't your enemy. It just shows you where the boundary of who you are today lies. Without fear, there's no growth, only repetition. Science itself has already demonstrated, when you face something that causes discomfort and still act, your brain creates new connections, new emotional responses, new capacities. They call it neuroplasticity. I call it liberation. Once, still early on, I had an opportunity to speak to a small group. To many, that might seem insignificant. To me, it was as if I were about to step onto a world stage. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing. Part of me wanted to run away. And I confess, for a second, I almost made an excuse, but I stopped, breathed, and told myself, if you run now, that fearful version of yourself will control your entire life. So I went. And on that day, even trembling, I discovered a version of myself that hadn't existed before. If I had given in to that fear, perhaps you wouldn't be listening to me now. How many opportunities have you let slip away by waiting to feel ready? How many conversations have you postponed? How many projects have you shelved? How many dreams have you put on hold because you thought you needed to eliminate fear before acting? Life doesn't reward those who wait. It rewards those who move. Fear doesn't dissolve with time. It dissolves with movement. Every time you advance despite it, you send a profound command to your subconscious. I am not a slave to this feeling, and that changes everything. I want you to do something simple, yet powerful. Grab a pen and write down right now. What decision are you postponing due to fear? It could be starting something, ending something, taking responsibility for something, asking for something, daring to do something. Choose one. And now, take one small action towards it in the next 24 hours. It doesn't have to be big. It just needs to be real. Because courage isn't born from grand leaps. Courage is born from small, repeated acts until fear loses its power. Remember, fear will always try to protect you, even from what was meant for you. So when it appears, don't ask, how do I make it disappear? Ask, where is it pointing? Because if there's fear, there's expansion. And if there's expansion, there's life. And when you choose to move forward, even trembling, the universe responds. It always responds. Not because you were already strong, but because you decided to act, and in acting, you became. Visualizing isn't vaguely imagining. It's not fantasizing, wishing for something to fall into your lap. Visualizing is an act of conscious creation. It's you sculpting reality first in the only place where all manifestation begins, within your mind. Most people think visualization is something mystical, nebulous, almost childish. But the brain doesn't distinguish between what you see and what you imagine with intensity and emotion. Neuroscience proves this. Studies with high-performance athletes show that those who train mentally activate the same brain regions as in physical training, and improve performance simply through the power of visualization. If the body responds to what the mind believes, why wouldn't your life do the same? When I started, I lived in a simple room with more bills than coins in my pocket. And yet, I would close my eyes and see myself speaking to thousands of people, traveling the world, impacting lives, writing books that would span generations. I saw myself with clarity, with wealth, with purpose. I felt what it would be like to walk onto a lit stage. I heard the people, I saw the faces, I felt the energy. And then I would open my eyes and clean an office floor. The difference? After visualizing, that floor was no longer my destination. It was just the path. Visualization changed my internal state, and when the state changes, behavior changes. And when behavior changes, reality inevitably follows. Most people visualize what they fear, not what they desire. They wake up thinking about what could go wrong, recalling worries, revisiting frustrations, and mentally creating the future they most wish to avoid. Unknowingly, they treat their fears as if they were prophecies. The brain doesn't ask if what you imagine is good or bad, it simply accepts it as emotional truth. If you rehearse failure every single day, how do you expect to achieve success? You need to train your mind to anticipate victories, not to relive defeats. Visualize not as an escape, but as a rehearsal, because life delivers what you emotionally prepare yourself for. There were mornings when I woke up utterly exhausted, seeing no signs of progress, and on those days, visualization was even more crucial. I would sit down, close my eyes, and take deep breaths. I would repeat what I wanted, feel the anticipated joy, and mentally walk through the life I knew was mine. There was one time in particular when I was completely broke, worried about how I would pay my bills. I went into a public restroom, pulled my gold card from my pocket, and right there, I visualized as if everything was already resolved. I felt peace before it even existed. I felt abundance before I saw a single cent. And I cried, because in that moment, I realized I had already changed internally, and no one could ever take that from me. Have you ever noticed that on tough days, your mind tries to pull you back into old patterns? It wants you to say, I can't do it. I'm not capable. It's not for me. It's precisely on those days that you need to stand up and see yourself as someone who has already arrived. Don't wait for reality to align itself before you believe. Reality aligns because you believe. It's not blind faith. It's emotional and mental science. You think, feel, act, and attract from the state you inhabit. Stop visiting your future. Start living in it. Do a daily exercise. Every day for 5 minutes, sit in silence. Close your eyes. See your goals as already achieved. Not as a possibility, but as a fact. See the details. Where you live, how you dress, who you talk to, what you feel when you wake up, what decisions you make, how you walk. See it, feel it, live it. The more you repeat this, the more your subconscious will begin to accept it as reality. And when the mind accepts, the body follows, actions follow, opportunities arise and doors open. And when that old voice appears saying, that's just your imagination, smile. Because everything that exists today, someone first imagined. The mind that creates is more powerful than the world that resists. When you clearly and emotionally see yourself in the future, you're not just playing with dreams. You are preemptively building what will inevitably manifest at the right time. Visualization is the rehearsal of your greatness. It's your intimate conversation with destiny. And whoever practices this internal dialogue daily, sooner or later, becomes what they envisioned. Do you realize how everything starts within? How every step, every vision, every silent change within builds a completely different world out there. Keep nurturing this image. Keep choosing the version of yourself that already lives this reality. Because every time you do, you bring the inevitable closer. And remember, you're not doing this just for yourself. There's someone near you who might never have heard that they can achieve more, that they were born for something greater, and who only needs a spark like this to awaken. So share this video with that person. It might be the push they've been waiting for years. Thank you for being here with me, for walking with me on this journey. I'll see you in the next video. We still have much to create together.